Today is October 2nd, 2020. I'm interviewing Sergio Cordova for the University Library Special Collections and Archives at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. My name is Dr. Noreen Rivera. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Mr. Cordova, that this interview will be placed in the University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at UT Austin. If there is anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there is something that you do want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll address. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting to make sure you agree with our interview procedures before we continue. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each question. Okay. So again, the University Library Special Collections and Archives wishes to archive your interview along with any other photographs or documentation that you're willing to share with our archive. UTRGV, University Library, will retain copyright of this interview and any materials you wish to donate to our special collections. Question 1. Do you give University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV consent to archive your interview and your materials at the UTRGV University Library?
Yes, I give my consent.
Thank you. Question 2. Do you grant UTRGV Special Collections and Archives right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials that you provide?
Yes, I give my consent.
Thank you. Question 3. Do you agree to allow UTRGV, University Library Special Collections and Archives, to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people from around the world?
Yes, I give my consent.
Thank you. Question 4. Do you grant the University Library Special Collections and Archives consent to share your Zoom interview with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voces of a Pandemic Oral History project, which will include posting the interview on their Voces website?
Yes, I give my consent.
Thank you. As you recall, we previously filled out a pre-interview form. We plan to use information from the pre-interview form to help with research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends it to UTRGV, Special Collections and Archives, we would have stripped out any contact information of yourself or family members, so that will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at the UTRGV University Library. So question 5 and 6. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file and allow us to make it available to researchers at UTRGV?
Yes, I give my consent.
Thank you. And question 6. On occasion, UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and Voces at UT Austin receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or email with journalists?
Yes, I give my consent.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Sergio, for your consent. And with that, we'll move on to the interview. All right. So Sergio, thank you for your time. Like I said earlier, your stories and experiences are valuable to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and the Voces Project at UT Austin. Particularly for us at UTRGV Special Collections, we are committed to preserving the stories of Mexican Americans and Latinos from South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley during this time of the COVID-19 pandemic. Given your tireless commitment to human rights and immigration rights as co-founder of Team Brownsville, given your work at Brownsville ISD, in special education, as well as your own experience with coronavirus, I know you have many meaningful stories that tell how COVID-19 has impacted your life and your life's work. So thank you again, Mr. Cordova.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of this project.
You're welcome, sir. So let's start off with a first question here. So go ahead and if you can, please share with me a little bit about yourself. Who is Sergio Cordova?
My name is Sergio Cordova, and I live in Brownsville, Texas, a beautiful community on the border with Mexico. And so I grew up here. My mother is an immigrant from Mexico, and she married my dad that lived here in Brownsville. So I grew up, I guess you can call it a family of first generation Mexican Americans. And so since we live in Brownsville, Texas, we see the community of immigrants, and we've always grown up with people that are recent immigrants or first generation, second generation, third generation. And so it's a beautiful community. I have 3 brothers, and grew up here, went to the public school system here, and also went to UT Brownsville, that was then, and then UTRGV. So graduated from the local college and local university, and then started working with the school district. And then about 2 years ago, got into the humanitarian work that we do at Team Brownsville.
All right, thank you so much, Sergio. I wanted to ask this next set of questions regarding your first experiences hearing about the coronavirus. So first question for this part here. When did you first hear about COVID-19, and how did you learn about it? Was it through radio, TV, social media?
I first heard about COVID-19 through the news outlets, just like everybody else. I remember back in, I believe in January, when people were saying there's a new flu out there, something new, a new thing. It could turn into a pandemic. We're not sure what it was. And then we heard that it started in China. And so the first thing that came to my mind is I remember the one we had a few years ago that was the swine flu. And I started kind of comparing to that because I think it came from the same region, according to the news. And so I thought, well, this one, the swine one came and went pretty fast. And yeah, they had some people that passed away from it, but it was a limited number. So I figured it was gonna be something like that. And much to my surprise, it didn't. It just growing and growing and growing. That's how I first heard about it.
Okay. And then were you reliant on, like, for example, as you know, in the Rio Grande Valley, we have News Channel 4, News Channel 5. Were you attuned to the local channels, or do you listen to certain cable or national channels as well?
Yes, I usually get online and listen to ABC, CNN, CBS, one of the national ones. And so when it first started to come into the US, we knew that it was in the East Coast, in the New York area, where it started, and it took months by the time it really hit down here. When people were in New York already talking about leveling the curve and all those things, we hadn't even gotten to the curve down here, but we were learning from, at least, you know, people that I know, we were learning from what they were doing in New York because we knew we were gonna have to do it. One first wave hit here. And so in the New York, Boston, and all those areas where it was hitting first, they were already talking about the seriousness of a second wave when we were barely getting our first wave in the valley, because it took that long to really come down little by little. Mm-hmm. So the first thing we think about is, okay, it's, you know, the travel, the people that are traveling from New York, the people that are traveling from different places to the valley, you know, who could be bringing it from over there? Because we were at one point, no cases yet. And then I remember Cameron County, the first one or two cases were in Rancho Viejo. And we knew that there was one or two people that were identified there first out of everybody in Cameron County. And then we come to find out that those individuals had traveled, you know, I don't know
Abroad, yeah.
if the state or they had traveled out of state, I forgot, but there was the two first confirmed cases in Rancho Viejo, Texas.
Do you remember what month that was?
I want to say it was in March.
Okay. Okay. So in March, yeah.
Early March.
Okay. Early March. And so that was also the time then that you probably realized that this pandemic was serious and life altering, and it was now coming to the Rio Grande Valley.
Yes, yes. And I knew that that our health systems here are not at the level of other places. So I knew it was a scary thing because in Brownsville, for having the population that we have and having the two small hospitals that we have, you know, I knew that if this was a real serious case, that it was going to overload those hospitals. And enough, it has.
And other follow-up question. Does your family members, do they hold the same beliefs as you do about COVID-19, or are there some members who may take it more seriously or even more lightly compared to you?
As far as myself, my brothers, my sisters-in-law, my mom, my dad, everyone takes it serious. We have been in lockdown pretty much since March. When we were told to stay home, don't go to, you know, any parties, only go out when you need groceries. My mom stopped going to church. And so she's been really, and all my family has, as far as going to restaurants, any of that, we've all stopped any of it. If we need food, it's gonna be takeout. When we go to TB, it's going to be because you really need something. And you take all the precautions, you wear your mask, you have your hand sanitizer in your pocket at all times. So yes, my family has been taking it very seriously since March, all of us.
And how has it affected your family dynamic? For example, the way that you all celebrate birthdays or anniversaries, comidas. Have you continued that through these times, or maybe do so less frequently?
I have not shared a meal with my family since before this started. And to this day, I haven't. We haven't visited each other. We have not had gone to any dinner parties or anything like that. My mother turned 80 May the 8th, a few months ago. And we did not have a party or dinner. We took presents and cakes and whatever and left them at the doorstep after we sprayed them down with disinfectant, because none of us want to be the one to take COVID to mom. She's 80. We know that the scientists are saying that after 70, it's a difficult and you know, to get cured from. And so she did turn 80, and this is the first time that we've never had at least a dinner for the family with her. And it was such a big one. I mean, 80, and we all went and took her something. And we rang the doorbell and, you know, sent our love and kisses from far from the sidewalk. But the important thing is that she's healthy, because we will celebrate 81. And so she's healthy, and that's what's important.
Yeah, keeping her around, definitely protecting mom. Okay, thank you, Sergio. Is there anything that you want to add regarding the family dynamic before we move on to our next section regarding Team Brownsville?
As far as the family goes, it's hard, you know, not to have that hug. It's hard not to be able to have dinner parties or things like that with your family members, because you miss them. And sometimes you feel guilty about it because you say, well, I don't want mom to think that I don't love her or that I don't miss her. And so, you know, we've been doing this kind of communication, maybe not through Zoom, but through WhatsApp, which you can see each other. And so we've been communicating like that with friends and family so that at least we can see each other. And it makes a difference. And I know that it's affected a lot of people in the sense that they, from what I hear, there's been people with depression and people that feel, you know, lonely and afraid. And so it's affected people in that sense also, as far as mental health and those kind of things.
Right. Especially since the family dynamic in Latino cultures and Mexican culture it's pretty solid
Yeah,
for many families. Yeah.
that's another thing that Mexican American families tend to live in multi-generation homes. And so that's so important because about this opening up of schools, you know, the kid goes to school, they get it, and not only do they affect mother, but grandmother, and sometimes a great grandmother that lives there, because that's just the way people are. The American culture is like, you don't send mom to the nursing home unless you absolutely have to.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these families live in multi-generation homes, and that makes it very hard because you think about if one of us gets it, then we're all gonna get it. Because, you know, a lot of the homes aren't really, really big homes where you have space to quarantine within a home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something significant also about Brownsville and living in our culture.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sergio. We're going to move into the Team Brownsville section now. And I can see why you want to be very cautious with your mom because of your work that puts you out there in society right now with your job. And then, of course, with your activism with Team Brownsville. So to get some backstory, Sergio, can you share with me what was the inspiration for co-founding Team Brownsville? And what was the buildup of events that led you to your action?
It all started with when we heard in the news and we saw the images in the news about the separation of immigrant families, of the separation of children from the parents at the border, when thousands and thousands of kids were being taken away, ripped from the parents' arms, and they were put into detention. And then for many, they were telling them, well, you're gonna have your court date, leave your kid here because your kid can't go to the court date, to the appointment. And when they would come back, the kids are gone. And they had no idea where they were taken or if they would ever see them again. And then we started seeing all these detention centers for kids all over the US. And these detention centers, all of a sudden one pops up here with Southwest Keys, Casa Padre, and we come to hear that there's 2,000 kids in there. Where are the parents? Then we come to hear that parents were actually being deported and the kids were left here. And I started thinking to myself, you know, how is it possible that we are doing this? The greatest country in the world is treating people worse than cattle or, you know, animals. And there was a rally here in Brownsville, Texas, a march, a protest march against it. And it was put on by the ACLU. And so I remember going with a group of friends to the march, and Michael Benavides and Andrea Rudnick was there also. And, you know, we did this huge protest. There was a lot of people. And come to see in the news that people are protesting all over the country against the separation of kids. We saw it in thousands of cities across the country. And so it was so important because of that, the administration was forced to stop that practice, or at least the majority of it, because we know it continued. After that, we started thinking as a group, is how can we continue? It's great to protest, and we see that there's so many people in the country that have our beliefs that immigration is important, that this country was built by immigrants. It was for by immigrants and made by immigrants. So how could it be that now we're closing our doors to immigration? And so then we said, well, we need to do something. We need to help. And it was in July of 2018, it's over 2 years now, we started helping people at the bus station in McAllen first, and then in Brownsville. We realized that the detention centers were releasing people at the bus station with only what the clothes they're wearing, with no food, no water, no money. And for many of them, they couldn't get bus tickets till the following day. And the bus station closed at that time, was closing at 11 p.m. So guess what? Now they don't have water, food, money, or a place to stay now. And so we would go at night and look, and sure enough, there would be 20 or 30 people sleeping on these benches outside with nothing. So that, at that time, we said, well, you know, we needed to do something. Here's our chance to do something. Here is the need. Here are the people in need. Why not start a group and start helping? And so that's exactly how we started. We started asking our friends and families for donations of water bottles, of snacks, so that we could give them a little back, or at least snacks, something to hold them over. And that's how we started, is just helping every evening at the bus station. Then one day we decided, because we hear that there's also, what happened was that metering started and people were not being allowed to cross the bridges anymore. Because when people wanted to claim asylum or ask for asylum, they would simply walk across the bridge and start the process. And they would be taken to a detention center, of course, and go through the process. But metering started where they were saying, no, we're only taking 1 or 2 a day. So the rest of you have to wait at the bridge. So we heard about it and it was like, could that be possible? So when we crossed the bridge the first time, we see about 40 people actually living on the bridge.
In what month was this, Sergio, when you crossed the bridge the first time?
It was in July of 2018. And so I still have pictures of that first day. And it was just, you know, I have that picture always stuck in my mind, because there was women, men, children, I mean, families actually living on the bridge. And we would ask them, well, how long have you been here? Anywhere from a day to 2 weeks of actually living there with nothing but what they were carrying. There was nothing to sleep on. They was sleeping on concrete and nothing to cover the sun. So we all know, if you've been in Texas in July, the heat is tremendous. And imagine having to live on concrete with no cover. And you couldn't leave the line, because if you left the line, you lose your spot. So that's when we started feeding the people there, taking them pizza, chicken, whatever we could purchase to eat. And then later on, another friend joined us, Brendan Tucker. He's like, well, let's start a kitchen and let's just start cooking ourselves. It'll be cheaper than, you know, when we buy rice and beans and some chicken, it'll be cheaper than buying, you know, fast food all the time and all that. And so that's how we started feeding the people at the bridge.
It's kind of like a binational or trans-border soup kitchen. make it in this side, wheel it over to the bridge, and then the other side as well, huh?
That's exactly how it started.
Okay. who were the earlier founding members of Team Brownsville in those days?
The founding members, and we're still there, all of us. It was myself and Michael Benavides, Andrea Rudnick, David and Melba Lucio. And at that time we had Brendan Tucker and a few others. And that major group is still there. We're still part of the board members. And so we've been there through the long haul, all the co-founders.
And it's a unique organization because of that international humanitarian aid, where because of our geographical location here in El Valle, it's just literally a walk across the Rio Grande to assist those in need who are trying to come to our side, right?
Exactly right. And so we always had those two missions. We've always had the mission of helping at the bus station, or the ones who make it across, and then helping the ones waiting to come in. And by starting this mission, we've met people from so many different countries, because some people think, well, it's only South America, but it's not. There's people from Cameroon, from Cuba. We've had people from Romania, people from Russia. We've had a few Germans. And so, you know, it's people from all over the world. The majority are from South America, but there's people there from everywhere.
From South America, and in Central America, I suppose, too, huh?
We've had a couple from Kosovo also. And so we've learned to learn how to use Google Translate. Because many of them will speak other languages. We had one today, as a matter of fact, from Haiti. Of course, the Haitians speak French. And so we have to use our Google Translate. And we had a guy yesterday from Romania. And so he spoke 7 languages. He spoke 7 languages, so he helped us translate with the guy that spoke French, because he knew French, English, Spanish, amongst other languages, German. It was incredible.
I wonder if he comes from an academic background or an educated background to have so many knowledges, to be that multilingual. That's fascinating. You get the whole world in a diverse collection of people with various education levels, and maybe even class levels too, working class, even middle class, that wash ashore on our borderlands here.
Exactly. And so it's been very interesting to learn how to translate, and you know, there's a lot of technology out there that has helped us translate and be able to communicate. A lot of people from China are coming. We've had many people from China.
And Sergio, Team Brownsville, they filled this void that seems to be just vacant in terms of what the I guess maybe U.S. CPB or Mexican government officials or organizations could do in terms of taking care of and providing humanitarian aid. What's been your relationship in Team Brownsville's relationship with Border Patrol and with the Mexican Federales on the other side of the Gateway Bridge?
Oftentimes we wondered, you know, because we see in the news about immigrant communities throughout the world, in Syria and all these places, and you always see images of the Red Cross or the UN or, you know, different organizations helping out. And so we all often wondered, where are these agencies? You know, because when at one point we got up to 2,500 people, we're feeding 2,500 people twice a day. And, you know, thank God that we had so many volunteers coming in, 20 or 30 a week, to come help us cook for the week. Because it's not an easy job to cook for that many people. So then World Central Kitchen came to help us. World Central Kitchen is a organization, and they help out communities like this, immigrant people, refugees. They have several camps throughout the world that they're helping to feed. So then they joined us last year, and they helped us with the dinner. And so that was a neat thing to see. Lately, we've also had the UN that has come to the camp, and they're trying to figure out a way to assist also. Mostly what they're doing is education about, wearing your mask and the distancing and the hand washing, and their part is really educating the camp. And so, but at least we see their presence there, and so, it makes it easier to. They're also working on programs to try to find homes for people that, if they know their wait is so long because of metering and MPP. So they do try to house people in Monterrey or in other cities in Mexico, that if they want to perhaps apply for asylum in Mexico, they're starting to develop a program to help those people.
Mm-hmm. And has the team ever received a difficult time crossing over because of U.S. customs or the Mexican federales?
Well, when we cross to Mexico, we don't check in with the U.S., so they don't know what we're taking that way. Mexican immigration, it just all depends who's there, because sometimes they see that we're carrying a lot of things and they want to charge us taxes. Sometimes we tell them it's for the immigrant camp. It's not going really into Mexico. It's going right there to the camp, so they'll let us through. But sometimes they're very strict on the rules of, if you have so much, then you have to pay taxes. So sometimes we do have to pay taxes. On the way back, coming, back into the US, there was, a lot of times when they would see, okay, what did you go do in Mexico? Or what was your purpose of your trip? To feed the immigrants that are waiting. Most of the time it was a positive, okay, thank you for doing that. Thank you. Once in a while you get a negative comment, but they got used to seeing us every day, that they were like, okay, here they come, let them through. We know it's Team Brownsville. And so they got used to it, and many times they were okay with it. They know, people have a heart. And so, they know we're doing our humanitarian work, and nothing that could be done or said was going to stop us. And so
that's good. Just a few negative comments in the journey.
At first, after a while, they saw that the work was getting bigger and bigger and more people. So they, it became, we didn't hear negative comments anymore.
That's good. Okay. And so this next question, before the pandemic, how did the team operate? And I know you've mentioned World Central Kitchen and your cooking operations. I've interviewed Melva, and I know that you guys also is an arm of Team Brownsville. There's also an educational outreach that you all have done as well, in addition to providing the necessities for immigrants who had to unfortunately remain in Mexico due to the Trump administration policies, just the basic human necessities and needs that they need to keep, that you need to provide for their wait. But can you walk me through any other ins and outs of Team Brownsville's Humanitarian Reach, especially as you all continue to have to react and meet the challenges of intensifying immigration policies?
Yes, so the big change after MPP started, and we saw that the camp grow from 20 people to 2,500. The biggest need was, of course, if you think of the basic needs of, if you're going on a camping trip, what do you need? So it was a tent for shelter. It was food, it was clothing, water. And so the thing, and toiletries, toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, clothing, soap to wash their clothing. And so it's all those things of what you think that you need on a daily basis. And so we had to find a way to raise the funds. And so we decided to one day to start the nonprofit so that people could start donating. And we started buying tents, and we couldn't take tents fast enough because 1 week there was 100 new people. And so we needed 50 tents. And by the next week is another 50 tents. And so tents aren't cheap to purchase. So we had to really raise money and raise awareness throughout the country so that people knew what was going on. And when it spread, because we were interviewed by the New York Times, by the LA Times, we came out in news outlets, in Nightline, and all these news outlets. So people started hearing about Team Brownsville, and Team Brownsville got well known throughout the country and still is. But people started volunteering to where we had to say, slow down, because if we didn't, we'd have 100 people this week, and you can't work with too many volunteers. So we had to schedule them like 20 per week. And so we had them scheduled down for 3 or 4 months in advance. That's how many people wanted to come help. And so these people were coming and helping us cook, helping us cross the tents, helping us. Mexican immigration allows 1 tent per person. So if 20 people cross, we could take 1 tent each. So we could cross 20. And if Tuesday came along, we could cross another 20. So we could get 100 across in 1 week without paying taxes because they allow 1 per person. So that was very important, is to have the more people that were crossing with us, the better we would do. And then once COVID hit, well, everything changed because first of all, like I mentioned before, it was up north first. It was in the New York area and those states first. So, and a lot of our volunteers were coming from there. And so we started thinking, okay, we don't want to be responsible. Team Brownsville members do not want to be responsible for introducing COVID into the camp. So our whole operational system had to change because of COVID. We had to call and email all our volunteers and say, please do not come till this COVID pandemic is over with, because we are not going to be responsible for taking in COVID into the camp. So even we as Team Brownsville members, co-founders, we stopped going into the camp. We're taking supplies, we're taking everything that they need, but we remain outside of the camp, and the people come out of the camp to pick up the supplies and take them into the camp. And that's our—
What month does your participation start to slow down to a trickle and then completely stop? What month was that?
It was in March.
In March too.
Because I work for the school district, and we went out for spring break in March and then never returned, because that's when the pandemic hit. And that's when we stopped crossing, and that's when we stopped the volunteers from coming. It was mid-March of this year.
So your Team Brownsville's lockdown coincided with the state of Texas and with Cameron County's lockdown.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And we didn't want, people coming from other states and then going into the camp. We had to stop, as hard as it was. And at first people really didn't understand and were, hurt. They were hurt their feelings because they had already bought their tickets. People had made their plans already to be here for a week. They had already rented an Airbnb and they had their plane tickets and all that. So it was hard to tell them to not come, but we had to for the protection of the people.
I guess Team Brownsville, there's a two-pronged effect in terms of troubleshooting human populations. You guys obviously provide humanitarian aid to the asylum-seeking immigrants, but also you guys have to troubleshoot and help with the logistics of your many national and even international volunteers.
Exactly.
I did notice that you all put up in red, because you have a fairly sophisticated website, is your grassroots operation expanded. You have a COVID statement there.
We've had thousands of volunteers, thousands of different people that have come down, beautiful people that have surfaced throughout the country, and even from England and other countries that have come to help us. It's amazing how the organization grew so big and so known throughout the country. So it was hard to put a break to it, because it started just, growing and growing, but we had to do it for the protection of the volunteers, plus the people at the camp, because we didn't want our volunteers coming and getting COVID and then taking it back to their communities also. So it was, it was for the protection of everyone. And when, you'd hear on the news, it's best not to travel, then, how can we say, well, continue to come? So even World Kitchen Service had to also stop their serving the food. And what instead are doing is paying a local restaurant to cook the dinner meal for the camp. Still, maintaining that by paying for it. And Team Brownsville is to continue to pay for the breakfast. So World Central Kitchen dinner, and Team Brownsville does the breakfast.
And have you set foot in the camp since March, Sergio?
No, I've crossed, but only outside of the camp. Like I said, to take supplies, to take tents, and then the individuals will come out of the camp to pick up.
Okay, all right. And just to shed some more light on the volunteerism, we've talked about a lot of international and national volunteers, but has anyone local from the Rio Grande Valley also assisted Team Brownsville's efforts?
Absolutely. We've had a lot of volunteers from Brownsville as well. And I know that also for the Escuelita on Sundays, we've had many local teachers that were joining us every Sunday to go teach for Escuelita. Of course, we had to stop that also since March. We're providing books and online videos and things for the kids to learn. And we have a couple of teachers in the camp that were teachers from wherever they came from. And so they do lessons for us. But we had to stop Escuelita also on Sundays. But so there was several teachers from the Valley that would join us on Sundays to go teach. And we had volunteers from the Valley that would also help us prepare the meals.
Can you share with me how you've seen COVID-19 in this pandemic both alter and further complicate the lives of the immigrants, both at Matamoros and then the ones who come across to the bus stations? Can you share any stories about what you've witnessed?
Yeah, so we know that there was, the way it's affecting the immigrants that cross over is that we know that there was an outbreak at some of the detention centers. One of them told me, the guy from Romania yesterday or the day before told me that it had gotten really, really bad at Port Isabel Detention Center, and that some of the officers there got very ill, and that he believes that one of them did pass away. And so they think that the pandemic came in, COVID came in that way. And so when it first started, tests, you got to remember that tests were not readily available. when we first saw it, there was no test. They had to develop the test later and then test it and all that, not like they're trying to do with the vaccines now. But back then, when it first started, we didn't have tests. And if you did find one, it was going to be 2 weeks later. So I think the prisons and the jails and the detention centers were having trouble also finding the tests. So they were having an outbreak at the detention center. This young man had been in the detention center for 16 months. A year and 4 months. So he was there pre-COVID. So he saw when it came in to the detention center, he saw how people were getting sick. And then the test came in. He said, once the test came in, they tested everybody. They isolated the ones in a certain building, the ones that were sick, and then they were able to control it. But he said at first it had gotten out of control because there was no testing.
And did he contract COVID as well while he was in the detention center?
He said he did not. He was a young man, but you know how some are asymptomatic, so sometimes you don't even know. When he got tested, he was negative.
And so what are the circumstances again, if with you meeting this young man from Romania, you were you transporting him to a bus station or assisting him to get on a bus north, or you know where he was headed? What's his story?
He's thinking that people are starting to be released more from the detention centers because of COVID. They don't want people to get sick and then to get really, really sick or even pass away, because you know that it becomes this big media thing and protesting and all these things. So, but he said he had been in detention for 16 months, and that along the way, along his trip through the South America is how he learned Spanish. He didn't know Spanish, but he learned Spanish because sometimes it takes him up to 6 months to work a little bit and travel, and then work a little bit and travel. And so I believe he told me he was going to Boston with a family member. And so, yeah, so we've had, and today, so anyway, so the detention centers dropped them off at the bus station.
Okay.
Okay. And so he was one that didn't have a ticket till the following day. Had to take him to a shelter, and then of course feed them, and then the next morning we picked them back up from the shelter and took him back to the bus station so he could get his bus ride. Today we took a little guy from Haiti. He was also one that had to spend the night, and so he wasn't feeling very well. He said he suffered from sickle cell anemia, and he was dehydrated the day before and had started shaking. And so what we had to do is, we felt that he was better off if we took him to a hotel room where he could really rest. And so we bought him some Gatorade, and so he could hydrate. And then we took him to a hotel room, got him a good dinner. And then Mark, which is also from Team Brownsville, picked him up today and took him back to the bus station where he was going to Boston. Yes, Boston, yeah. Where was the Romanian going to?
Boston also.
Boston, right? Yeah, they were both going to Boston.
Okay. And that's fascinating how you're juggling this all while maintaining a 40+ hour work week as a BISD employee.
Yeah, so it's on the phone and coordinating with Mark, and Mark's the one that's really doing all the driving. Evenings is when I have time, and I'll go to the bus station and pick up the individuals. Yeah, so today 3 girls got dropped off, and one was from Ecuador, and the other 2
Nicaragua and Mexico.
Nicaragua and Mexico. And so, you know what was so beautiful about the story is that one of the girls lived here in Brownsville, and she got released with the girl from Ecuador, and the girl from Ecuador didn't have a place to spend the night. So this girl, the girl from Mexico, offers the girl from Ecuador to stay at her house. So she took care of her, and we didn't have to spend money on a hotel and stuff. So in detention center, they make bonds and they make friendships and they help each other out because they know they're all in the same boat. Sometimes it's a beautiful thing to watch them. And I've seen them because they've been in detention for so long, for over a year sometimes. When they say goodbye to each other at the bus station, because they know that they'll probably never see each other again. You know, sometimes you see that embrace and those tears because they suffered through a year and a half. I've seen young men that have been there over 2 years in detention, if you can imagine, for trying to seek asylum. And so when they say bye to their friends, it's an emotional, you know, a goodbye, because they know deep in their hearts that they probably won't see them again. And it was someone that you spent 2 years with and that you to have a friendship with and care about.
Wow.
So the first thing we do is we look through their paperwork to see if they have a COVID test. As the detention centers have been, because they contracted the pandemic in there and they had an outbreak. So we're giving them, thank God, they're giving them the paperwork of the COVID test and where it says they're negative and that they're able to travel. And so we did purchase a thermometer, one of the ones for the forehead. So before we take anybody in our cars, you know, we take their temperature, we look through their paperwork to make sure that because we have to keep ourselves safe, you know, as much as possible as well.
And are you wearing any PPE as you're transporting?
Yes, we're always wearing our masks, and we also have shields.
A shield.
If
Okay.
they don't have the paperwork where they're COVID negative, we make them wear a shield and gloves.
Okay. Is family separation still occurring during these pandemic times? I know that you mentioned a few minutes ago that it's gone down to a trickle since there was a lot of national backlash to it, but are families still being separated or put in extreme duress? Mothers separated from children, for example. What have you seen in these pandemic times regarding family separation?
What we see because of MPP and parents that have to wait in Mexico, that many people do not, and they started fearing COVID. They started fearing COVID in the camps. And because everybody's so close together living in tents, in the camp, they tried their best to have a section for quarantining people that were positive. But still there was a fear. And so what some parents started doing is sending their kids, you know, through the bridge. And that's a form of separation, and it's really caused by the government. And then President Trump recently signed an order that said nobody is going to cross during COVID. Because before COVID, unaccompanied children that presented themselves at the bridge had to be allowed to cross. Okay, and since COVID started, then President Trump signed an executive order, I believe, that said that nobody's coming in. What they started doing is taking these kids to hotels instead of detention centers, and then deporting us back. And if you go to the Brownsville airport around 5 or 6 in the morning, you will start seeing the deportation flights from the Brownsville airport. And they happen daily. And you seeing the kids and the parents and, you know, the families being deported. And that a lot of it has to do with COVID, because they fear that, you know, COVID's coming in, but we don't know, well, there's more COVID in the US than over there. And so, and then one thing to think about is, like, if people are COVID positive, and we're sending them to Nicaragua and Salvador and all these other places, are we also spreading COVID to other countries? Something to think about.
In our pre-interview, Sergio, you had shared with me a story about a pregnant woman who had given a premature birth, and then there was a matter of trying to get her to be with her newborn after she had to relocate from the hospital back to the ICE detention center. Can you recall that for me, please?
Yes. So this the young lady was at a shelter in Matamoros. She did not go to the camp, but she was staying in a shelter because she had a little boy and she was pregnant. Well, she felt that there was something wrong. She tells me the story once she gets on this side, of course. But she told me she felt something wrong. Something was not right with the pregnancy. She could feel it. And because she couldn't get medical attention, the family decided to cross through the river. And so once they crossed the river, of course, they turned themselves into Border Patrol because they don't want to be illegal. They want to get processed the right way. So they turned themselves into Border Patrol. They're taken to detention center as a family, and then she goes into labor. And so they take her to the hospital, and they have to do an emergency C-section. And they find out that the umbilical cord is wrapped around the baby's neck. And so that's what she was feeling. I guess a mom knows when there's something wrong. And so the devastating part of the story is that once she has the C-section, they sew her back up and then send her back to detention. And the baby was left preemie at the hospital. I get a call one day from a social worker at the hospital, and she said, "Well, we're looking for the mother because we need her to breastfeed this baby. He's a preemie and he needs, you know." And so I find out that she's probably in detention. I put all my stories on Facebook. Who can help me? Well, we had a wonderful pediatrician that called me from up north that wanted to help me. And then she got a lawyer involved. And so many people got involved and started in detention. And a day or two later, they were released from the detention center, taken to a shelter. We were able to pick them up from the shelter and take mom to the hospital to reunite her with her baby. And because of COVID, nobody else is allowed in the hospital, only mom. So dad or little brother couldn't go in, nor us, Team Brownsville, were not allowed in. Only mom's allowed in, wearing a mask and gloves, of course. And so, you know, we were able to reunite mom and baby. Baby was in the hospital for about 10, 12 days. Once baby was released, we took them to a pediatrician that was willing to help us pro bono and was able to give an okay to travel because they were going to Virginia. They were going to fly. And so, you know, the baby was tiny and delicate. So we needed to make sure that the baby could fly and wouldn't have, you know, issues with their heart or anything like that. Yeah.
And so that family unit, mom, new baby, dad, and little brother, they were able to together fly out to Virginia with this collective help of do-gooders like yourself at Team Brownsville. Plus, you put out the Facebook red alert, we need help. A kind pediatrician comes, gets a kind attorney and legal assistance, coupled with the local medical help to all make this effort happen for this family.
Exactly. And Miles for Immigrants helped by paying for the flight from donors all across the country. So paid the flight for everybody. And so it was wonderful. And I forget the name of that organization. Maybe I'll remember later, but all these people that I mentioned also have their own organization to help immigrants.
Just as a question for the future with regards to Team Brownsville and their efforts. And I mean, we're in October now and the weather's getting a little cooler, right? And as you know, fall and winter is a time for cold fronts and drizzly weather and probably the exacerbation of COVID. That's what the scientists are predicting, right? A hard winter. What is Team Brownsville doing to maybe offset some of those scary times on the horizon?
Yeah, well, we're working on a project right now to get blankets across, and we want to start getting them across early. We do have a donation from Church World Services that always helps us with blankets. We also get donations from the Red Cross of blankets. And so it's just our job to cross them. And so sometimes it's hard because we have to cross 600 blankets. And it's big, bulky blankets. So we're starting to work on that. Also, Melba Lucio, our other member, is working on a campaign to buy for people to donate rain boots. And so she's asking for the community to donate. I think her goal is 300 or 400 rain boots for the kids. I think she already got at least 100 pairs. So, you know how in Brownsville, because of humidity, as soon as it gets cold, it gets wet. And so it's muddy. There's nothing but mud at the camp. And so the rain boots are very important for the kids not to slip around and all that. So we're doing what we've done for the last 2 winters, is to collect blankets and to collect coats, heavy coats, to do our best to try to keep people warm. Okay. And of course, gloves, and these always help also.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to add or share about asylum seekers, their families, that should be mentioned for the sake of future students and scholars and people who will listen to your pandemic experiences in the digital archive before we close up the section on Team Brownsville?
Yes, I'm 53 years old and I've lived in Brownsville all my life, and I've never seen people living on a bridge or people living in camps waiting to come in. Immigrants have always been allowed to come in. I believe 4 years ago, the United States had signed that they were allowing 110,000 immigrants to be able to come in. And I believe that recently it was signed that only 12,000 were going to be allowed. And so, you know, as I mentioned before, the US is a country built on immigration, built by immigrants. I hope that when you're watching this, that all that has changed and that immigrants are going to be allowed to come in, especially people that are running for their lives, that are in danger of being killed, and that really, you know, could lose their lives if they went back. I'm hoping that by the time this is seen, in whatever year this is seen, that I'm hoping that immigration and immigration policy have been changed and that immigration has been restored to what it has always been.
Okay, thank you, Sergio. I wanted to move on our final couple of sections. I wanted to get your story, your personal story with COVID-19, as well as talk a little bit about BISD before we close. And so with regards to your personal fight and recovery of COVID-19, can you take me through the story of your experience with COVID-19, like from when you first noticed symptoms, and then just go ahead and share the story of your road to recovery?
Sure. Let me see. Let me think of what month I'm in.
We're in October 2nd now.
So I remember the exact day. It was July the 13th or 14th when I knew that I had it instantly. I just felt it in my body. You could just tell from one hour you're okay, and the next hour you suddenly feel heat, and you feel, in your sore throat. You feel it in your throat first, and you feel this heat throughout your body. And I said, I know I have it. And I'm not sure where or how I contacted it, because I had always been wearing a mask and I had always been with my hand sanitizer everywhere. So I'm not sure if I did get it from a trip that I took, but I was very careful, or maybe from from the individuals that I had helped at the bus station. I'm not sure, but I could feel it, and it was on a Tuesday. And I felt it and it was in the evening. I felt the sore throat and I felt this heat. So I took my temperature, and I was at 101 or something like that. So I immediately took some Tylenol. That night I got into bed, and then the following day I went to get a COVID test. And I found a clinic, and it was on a Wednesday, and I found a clinic that would test you, and then 3 or 4 hours later, they would give you the results. And that's rare, because if you go to some of the other ones, it takes days and days and days. But I wanted to know right away, so that I knew that I needed to isolate myself and not get because I have asylum seekers that live here at the house, and I didn't want to get the other people sick. So it was very strange, but it came out negative. But later I learned that there's two types of tests. And the test is not going to show until your body has developed antibodies for COVID. And that's what it detects. So if you got infected and you just start feeling the symptoms, your body hasn't developed antibodies yet. So that particular test is going to show negative, when in reality you do have it. And then there's another different type of test that knows when you got it right away. So then I tested again on Saturday, 3 days later, and then then it showed positive. It takes a while, but I knew I had it because I was at Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Those 4 days I was in bed with severe body pain. It felt like if you have arthritis in every single bone in your body. So every movement that I would make in bed just was super painful. And so I stayed in my room all those days, and my friends would bring me my food, and Mark would feed me, and but it was very challenging to be. It was the fear, to tell you the truth, the fear of the unknown. You hear all these horror stories of people, passing away and then being intubated and all those things. I was like, what if that happens to me? I'm 53. I'm not a young,
Yeah.
And so it was very scary. I'm going to be honest with you. So there was a lot of prayer going on, and a lot of, things that you think about, and hoping that you didn't feel worse. But thank God that after that 4th or 5th day, I just started feeling better, and the pain started less and less. I never got a headache like a lot of people are getting, a severe headache. Didn't lose my taste or my smell, which some of my friends that have gotten COVID lose the taste and smell. It's like they say for a whole week, they don't want to eat anything because they can't taste it and they can't smell it. And I kept testing my smell by different deodorants and my cologne. I would test myself, can I still smell this? So you go through all these phases about, you know, you want to make sure. And I took a lot of vitamins. I took multivitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D, you know, everything that had been recommended. I was also taking a lot of tea, a lot of chamomile tea, hot teas with lemons, that we had heard also that it was something that people thought it would help because it would help get that hot liquid in the neck and kind of get it off of your. And so I mean, you start researching and seeing, well, what are people recommending that you do? So, you know, it was a very scary time. And after the 5th day, I knew that I was going to be okay because, you know, the pain started going away. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I felt that I was going to be okay.
And the second time you got tested, Sergio, was that at a Brownsville testing center? Or did you have to travel to Harlingen or another part of the valley to get that second test that did test where you received the positive result?
It was a pediatrician clinic that was doing drive-through testing. And so I think we drove through at 9 a.m. and then they would tell you, okay, drive back around at 12 and we'll have you your results. And so there was a line of 50, 60 cars and, you know, got tested with the swab in the nostril. And by the way, that's painful in itself because they have to get it way up here and it's painful. It's not, you know, just a little swab down here. Mm-hmm. It goes up. It feels like it has some kind of alcohol or some kind of liquid on it because it's kind of stings and it makes you tear up. It makes water, your eyes water. Mm-hmm. And so came back around through the drive-through and they gave me my results and they said, yeah, you're positive. I had already known it because I had already been in bed for 4 days. Mm-hmm. Extreme pain. And I knew that it wasn't a regular flu because I know what a regular flu feels like. I've never had that severe pain in my body, never. And I've had flus all my life, you know. Sure. Then about the sneezing, because usually when you get a flu, a regular flu, there's a lot of sneezing, a lot of coughing, a lot of phlegm. This one wasn't like that. It was a sore throat, fever, and severe body pain.
And your lungs, anything with the lungs or breathing, oxygen?
No. Thank God I didn't have any problems with respiratory issues. Okay. But that's when it gets serious. When it does affect your respiratory system, that's when people get really sick. And that's when people have problems breathing. And if it gets too bad, that's when people, you know, get intubated. And then, you know, many people, sometimes they tell you once you get intubated, there's very few people that come out of that. So,
do you know any of your friends who have had it get into their respiratory system where they needed to go to the hospital?
I got one friend that told me that it got to the point where he had trouble breathing. He felt like he couldn't get enough oxygen. Mm-hmm. But it went away after a couple of days. So he didn't have to go to the hospital. I have Facebook friends that did get intubated and go to the hospital and you know, they didn't make it. So it's a sad thing.
So you've already lost friends in their 40s, 50s, 60s, somewhere in that age range.
A couple of people my age in their 50s. Oh.
Mm-hmm. And does the county, when you test positive, what documentation does the county give test takers?
They put you on some kind of database because I did get a call, people checking up on those that had, those people that have been positive. And so they take information. How old are you? You know, did you go to the hospital? Did you do this and that? Do you feel fine now? Have you retested? Are you negative now? Because to go back to work, you have to test and take proof that you're now negative and take it into work. If not, you can't go to work. Mm. And so I had to do that. And then, so the county was calling and verifying of how many people really got sick and ended up in the hospital and how many people recovered and were able to return to their normal lives. And then they would also ask you questions like if you had long-term effects, because people have things that aren't going away even after months. Trouble breathing. I hear a lot of people with severe fatigue that just don't have that energy that they used to have. They're tired all the time. They want to rest. They want to nap. And you know, I have a coworker that had it and more severe than I, and she says she has trouble remembering things. And she's only in her 30s. She said, I just can't remember things. I just can't. It affected my brain. But she was out for like a month. And so there, you know, when have we ever heard of a flu that affects like that long term? A flu comes and it goes and you're fine. This thing is causing long term or effects that will be for the rest of your life. We hear that people have heart conditions now for the rest of your life, lung problems, breathing problems, memory problems. And so there's this thing is just not something that we've ever seen before.
Yeah, it's hard to pin down with the ways you describe it. It's affecting multiple bodily systems and very different outcomes depending on the body, who gets it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the insurance, was your insurance able to cover a lot of your medical costs? Any issues or concerns with the financial side of COVID?
The insurance, or at least the clinics that were offering the flu shots, were not taking insurance for the payment of the test, of the COVID test. So that's something that we were paying out of pocket. And when you're scared and you need to know, you know, you don't think about those things. You just think about pay and, you know, go forward because you need the information. And I think they were trying to do it so fast that there wasn't time to fill out this form. No. You don't understand. There was a line of 100 cars.
Yeah.
Needed to test quickly. And there was lines all over the city.
What was the cost of your first and second test?
I think, let me see. I want to say $79 or $89, something like that.
Awesome. For both of them? The rapid and then the other?
Yeah, each. Of course, the city was doing the free ones, but when I did the free one with the city, it took like 14 days to get results.
Oh.
By that time, you're over it.
Or dead. In some cases, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then one of the saddest things was to see at the hospitals, because in the evening, I went to the hospital one evening and there was at least 8 groups of people in the parking lot. And they had speakers with guitars and praying and singing. And there was about 8 groups of them in the parking lot because they're not allowed to go in. And then I remember the saddest thing was to watch, because I was there for 2 or 3 hours, and to watch, I don't know if it was a nurse or a doctor that came out to tell of one of the groups that their loved one had just passed, because nobody is allowed to come in. And so, and then you see that group and they fall apart, and this young girl threw herself on the parking lot, and one threw themselves on top of the car and just yelling and crying, and you're like, oh my God, you know, that person, whether it was their mother or grandmother, whoever, died alone. They don't get to say goodbye. And I think that's affecting so many people, is that you don't have that closure.
Right.
Because usually you go to the hospital and you kiss them in the forehead, and you know, a lot of people watch them and are there when they pass and go to the other side. And in these cases, that's the most horrible thing, that these people are dying by themselves because nobody is allowed to go in. It doesn't matter. Even if they know that person's going to die in the next 20 minutes, I can't allow the child to go say goodbye. And so I think a lot of people, you know, are being affected by that because that's never happened before, where you miss that chance, the opportunity, that last hug, that last embrace, that last kiss, that last goodbye, that last thank you, that last whatever it is, or forgive me, or whatever it is that you have in your heart, whether you're gonna, you know, ask your mom for forgiveness for not seeing her in the last year, or whatever it is that people needed to say when I, and so that's just been tragic.
Okay. Sergio, in this section here, I wanted to ask for your stories in terms of your occupation at Brownsville ISD. So for the sake of our archival interview, Sergio, can you tell me your job title and just a description of what you do at BISD?
Sure, I'm the lead educational diagnostician, and kind of oversee all the assessment people in the special ed department. The diagnosticians test for learning disabilities, dyslexia, and those kind of things. I also work with my coworkers, our school psychologists, and our speech pathologists. And so what happened was, with COVID, you know, this school year changed tremendously for us because we went off spring break and everything was somewhat normal. We had heard of COVID, you know, up in different states, but during spring break is when it really hit the valley. Yeah. We started seeing it back. And then we had a state of emergency where the governor decided to, and the county decided to close down the schools. So we never came back.
Oh, yeah.
We never came back. The kids never came back. Some adults, some of the adults, we trickled in little by little, you know, and what's been so different is, okay, we have to shift to, okay, we need to start ordering PPE. So when in the history of schools are we now ordering PPE instead of books, you know? Yeah. And start ordering hotspots and start ordering Chromebooks and laptops and those kind of things. We knew we needed to continue to educate the kids, but we needed the equipment that was necessary to continue an education online. And because many of our families do not have internet service, we had to order hotspots. And the companies that make these products got to the point where they sold out. So, because every single school district in the United States was ordering these things. So they were sold out of laptops, of Chromebooks, of everything. So we had to be on a list of standby. And as you well know, also PPE ran out throughout the country or throughout the world, for that matter. There was not a mask to be found. No hand sanitizer that we could purchase anywhere. And we were trying to buy for Team Brownsville as well. We were trying to buy masks and hand sanitizer and gloves. We couldn't find them anywhere in the internet. Everybody was sold out. And so, you know, that was just so strange to know a school district employee having to worry about supplies that a hospital usually purchases, you know, gloves, masks, sanitizer, disinfectant spray, bleach wipes, and all these things that usually a hospital does. We were doing it as a school district, and school districts all over the place. And then having to purchase technology. I know that Brownsville ISD had to convert 10 buses into mobile hotspots,
Oh,
drive them to the areas of where we felt there was more community members without internet. And so those buses were, it was a mobile hotspot. I forgot what the radius is of people that are able to pick up. So the school districts have had to change their way of thinking, their way of teaching. A lot of teachers and us as employees had to really get tech savvy real quick.
and in your case, you deal with the students of special needs, as you said, students with dyslexia and other issues. How have you all been doing addressing the educational needs of the various special needs students in BISD?
Yeah, so we had to provide an opportunity for, you know, an appropriate education for everyone. And so when something like this, a pandemic hits, you start to think, okay, you know, the average student could probably get online the way we are right now, but you have those kids with attention deficit disorders, with dyslexia, with, you know, other health issues. Maybe you have kids with physical problems that, you know, and so you start thinking of, okay, but the average student could probably use the laptop, okay, but then I have a child with a physical problem and they're gonna need a special keyboard. Maybe, you know, a kid with ADHD cannot be on this Zoom for an hour like the average child. So I need to break his lesson down to only 15 minutes where he can, you know, and so there was a lot of things. And then you start to think about, okay, what about our kids with hearing problems that can't hear? So we needed to have the interpreters along with the teachers to be able to do the sign language interpretation online. The way you see, sometimes you see newscasts and there's in the corner, you see the, you know, the interpreter. And so all those things had to come into play. It wasn't just, okay, instead of teaching in the classroom, get on the computer. There's a lot of technical issues and things that you have to think about so that children can be successful, and especially children with special needs. And then you start to think about kids with autism. Sometimes kids with autism, they don't do well. You know, certain noises affect them, certain lighting and things like that. And so there's a lot of issues that we had to come and try different things, and the parents have been wonderful they have to be on the other side of that computer also helping their kids to stay on track and to stay logged on and to make sure the kids are attending to the class and turning in so it's been a learning experience for everyone,
Yes.
for the administrators, for teachers, for students, and for parents, because we all had to dive into technology like we've never done before and quickly. And we had trainings every day of people that had never done a Zoom before, that have never, you know, taught this way before. And it's just been a huge learning experience. And I think that teachers have done a wonderful job, you know, because it's not easy to jump from A through Z and between. You just have to go. Because one day, I remember it said, okay, in 2 weeks we're going full force, everybody online.
And what day, Sergio, does BISD get the students back? Are you all inviting students back whose parents do want to put them back in the physical classroom? Like some other Valley districts?
We invited kids back this week, but we allowed kids to come in, the ones that do not have internet or a device.
Okay. So students with those special technical needs only were invited to come back, and the rest who do have access to stable Wi-Fi must remain at home. Is that how BISD is handling it?
That's correct. And most kids, and most parents don't want their kids to come back yet.
And have you been physically back in your office as director, or are you still remote?
I've been working from the office since I got my negative test.
Okay.
July, I guess it was the first week of August or something like that. I've been back at the office, but you know, I work in an office that's by myself.
Right.
So I just make sure that I have my mask on all the time, and I have my disinfectant spray. And you know, the interesting thing is that they say once you've had COVID, then after 3 months,
right,
you can get it. During 3 months, you know, you kind of developed an immunity for it because you have those antibodies. But after 3 months, you know, you're susceptible to getting it again. I got it July 13th, July, August, September. So mid-October, I'm susceptible to getting it again.
You realize your clock is,
It
the alarm is going to ring soon in terms of needing to really hunker down or wear that added PPE.
Exactly.
Okay. And for your meetings with teachers, are you doing mostly virtual, like Zoom?
Yes, we're doing everything virtual. We're not having any meetings together.
All right. And then a final question that I wanted to ask, because I actually read this in the newspapers, that there was a petition from BISD teachers on change.org regarding it, top level administration, with a petition to remove your current superintendent, Rene Gutierrez, and the teachers cited a failure to effectively lead during the coronavirus pandemic. Do you have anything to say about that, or these internal struggles of BISD at the moment, or has this been resolved?
I didn't read that particular thing, but what I can tell you is this. There's teachers, and I had my own coworkers and my own employees that at the end of the year, people that had not planned to retire, retired. They didn't want to come back. And it's mostly people that are, 55 and older, people with medical conditions, people that were older and overweight and have, I had a couple of them that have issues, respiratory issues. And so I have one young lady that was a little bit over 70. So there are people like that said, I'm retiring, I'm not coming back. Had COVID not happened, I would not have retired because, there are people that are full of energy and all that. But because of COVID, people retired. Mm-hmm. So right now, people that cannot retire because they don't have the time in the amount of years.
Right, in TRS, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, or they can't afford it, but they do have health issues. Those are the people that are really scared, and they have a right to be, because if you come back and you have 20 kids in your classroom is only a certain size. There's no way you can distance all those kids, and especially if you work with the little ones, teacher, they're going to want to come up and hug you. And so you have all these kids separated in plexiglass. We have to order plexiglass for every student. So imagine the teacher teaching with 20 kids behind a plexiglass. And there cannot be, you have to distance yourself the 6 feet that's being required. And then you stop to think about, what about the hallways? What about the kids are coming in and going out? So the district has purchased temperature kiosks. Come into the building, you put your face, it recognizes you, and then it takes your temperature. And so everyone's required to take temperatures before they enter the building. So that's an important thing. But that's what all that is about, is teachers are scared because they feel that,
or could be Yeah.
they'll have serious medical issues. And
Right.
so, they feel that if we're doing a good job remotely, then why are we going back?
Right. Especially if we, as you rightfully said, we went in such a hard lockdown in March when we did not have the high amount of cases that we regularly see here in El Valle, right? Every day it's another 20, 30 people dead by the reports. And
Yeah.
it's
If
amazing.
we're still, yeah. So if we're still at that curve, why are we going back now? And that's what the concern of the teachers are. They know we have to go back sooner or later, but they just don't feel that it's the appropriate time.
Right. Okay. All right, Sergio. And this is just the final set of questions that we can, or that I wish to ask to close off our interview. That's been wonderful. I'm really glad I had the pleasure to get your stories for the archive. They've been illuminating. So final questions. Would you take the first COVID-19 vaccine available on the market? Why or why not?
I would first educate myself as far as what testing has been done, how many people have been tested on it. If it's 10 people, then of course not. If it's a study just like any other drug where they've been testing it on several people and now it's out and the CDC says it's healthy, then yeah, I would. But I would first do a study myself and the research, just like before taking any other medication. What are the side effects? What could happen? Go from there. But I think that one day we will have a vaccine that'll be available and that'll be safe.
Okay. Overall, what's your satisfaction level with the local COVID response in Brownsville and across the LRGV?
In my personal opinion, I think that our Cameron County judge and our mayor of Brownsville, Trey, and they've been doing a wonderful job of getting it out there, of doing the restrictions about traveling, and then we had the lockdown. I think we've done a wonderful job. Unfortunately, we didn't get the backing from the governor as far as not being able to mandate certain things because kind of override us as a state government. So, but I think if that didn't happen, and we could continue to limit the amount of people in our restaurants, to limit the people that are traveling and all those things, then I think we could have a better control.
Yeah.
And I think that our local governments didn't want to open the schools right now. These things came from the state, and the state is the one that's pushing for us to open the schools. And so that's where the problem is. But local government, I think they've done a wonderful job.
Okay. What about your satisfaction level with the national federal response to COVID-19?
That's where the problem lies, in my opinion. This administration has done very little to combat this, to flatten the curve, as far as they've been pushing to reopen the economy. It appears to me that the economy comes over the livelihood and the health of the public. And so that's been a big concern. If you're at the top of that curve, why are you pushing some states to reopen? It doesn't make sense to me. For me, the lives of these people should matter above all over a company going bankrupt. You know what? After COVID's done and gone over, the restaurants are going to reopen. The businesses are going to be open. Everything's going to come back. Those 200,000 people that have died are never coming back. So it's just so, I think this administration has done a very poor job of controlling it. We could have done a lot better.
And just to mark the historical moment, it was last night at 12 a.m. our time is when our country learned that President Trump and the First Lady, as well as several White House staffers, now have COVID-19 as well. So truly historical times.
Yeah, we wish them the best, and we wish them a recovery. But it's so shameful that a lot of times this was played off as a hoax, and it was the leadership never promoted the wearing of the mask and those things. And so it's a shame that, you know, our top administration should have always done what was right and led as, what was the word I'm looking for? You lead by example. You should lead by example, and you should always wear that mask. That's most important. Every scientist and doctor has told us that the mask wearing will reduce the amount of cases. And so we wish we wish them the best, and we wish them to come back healthy soon.
Quick recovery. Okay, and then this is the second to last question, Sergio. Has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your desire to vote in the 2020 presidential election and in the down ballot races and local races for political positions? Yes, no, how so?
I'll tell you this, COVID hasn't affected me in voting because I had already made my choices of who I was going to vote for. COVID is one little part of the big picture, but it hasn't affected me in a sense because I'm not changing my mind of who I had already picked pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. So I think that COVID is an issue for those people that were maybe on the fence, you know, and they feel that the leadership has been very poor, and so maybe they'll vote against current administration. But for me personally, it hasn't changed my mind because I already knew exactly who I'm voting for.
And perhaps has it affected how you plan to vote? Do you plan to send in a mail-in ballot, or will you still show up in person to your local polling place?
I'm going to show up to my local polling place, but I'm going to vote early. I believe early voting starts October 13th. And because I always early vote. I always early vote because if I go during my lunchtime, there's nobody there. There's nobody there. So I can come in and out in 2 minutes, 3 minutes. As if you wait till the day of elections, you'll be there for a long time because those lines are long.
So it seems like your strategy is, as you've done in the past, for the sake of time, but now for the sake of health, go during off hours to reduce crowds being around. Okay. Final question. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we close about your experiences with COVID-19? Anything that we haven't covered or I haven't asked about?
I just want the listeners to know that I'm 53 and I've never lived through something this heartbreaking, this scary, and to see it kind of comes like a plague, and you see it coming from the north, and it's a plague, and then before all is said and done, 200,000 people are dead. And something that I had never seen before in my lifetime. We know that there was these bubonic plagues and these other things that have gone out through history and wiped out thousands and thousands of people. But I was born in 1967 and I'm 53. So I had never lived through a pandemic such as this. And so I never thought I would live through it, because you get to the point where you think the US and the world are so advanced medically that you don't think these things are possible anymore, you know? Yellow fever and all these things from the past that killed a lot of people. and you feel like you get to a point, okay, we eradicated measles, we eradicated polio and all these things in the past. So you think this is not going to happen ever again. We're so advanced medically, and then you come to think of it as we're as vulnerable as this world has always been, because there's new strains. There's new strains all the time of a flu. There's new strains of all these, and it's kind of like a competition between the medication. Here's a strain of a flu, and we develop something to combat it, and then the strain comes back in a different way. And so it's always a fight between, you know, our medical industry and what's out there, you know, the flus, pandemics, and so
Last thing is a political fight too on believing the science.
Exactly. So, so maybe if this is seen in 10, 20, 30 years, well, I hope that we get to that point where I thought we were at, where this wasn't going to happen again. And so, bless everybody. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this. And I've had a wonderful time being part of it, and thank you so much.
You're welcome, Sergio. Thank you for your stories, and we appreciate that you decided to contribute them to the archive and the study of Latino Mexican American experience. Thank you.
My pleasure.